It is readily apparent that BYU's offense is in a slump right now. What is it going to take for them to bust out of said slump? Well, nobody really asked me, but I've got a few ideas.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who like to call our everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and save $20 off your first purchase with our friends at Game Time. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. As I mentioned in the open, BYU's offense is stuck, and they have scored exactly 3 offensive touchdowns in the last 5 halves of football. That's 2.5 games for those of you doing math at home. What is it going to take for BYU to bust out of the slump that they're in right now? Well, I've got 3 things that I think could fix BYU's offensive woes. Now, let's also acknowledge right at the outset, Aaron Roderick and the rest of the BYU coaching staff is not seeking my approval for anything that they're going to do with this offense. These are purely my ideas. Number 1, I want to see BYU play with more tempo. Now, there's been a few people who have reached out to me, both in our insiders group as well as those out on social media, saying, Jake, why doesn't BYU run the 2-minute offense all of the time? The fact of the matter is running the 2-minute offense is a unique thing because in the 2-minute offense, defenses go into more of a shell in terms of trying to keep things in front of them, and it allows you to attack a little more of the squishy or doughy parts of a defense. I'm using food analogies, but you get what I'm talking about. You're able to attack different parts of the field much easier than if it were a different point in the game. So when I say I want to see BYU play with tempo, I don't want to see them necessarily the hectic 2-minute, get up there, get the call, snap the ball. I don't want to see that per se, but I don't want to see this plodding, methodical, huddle up every time, break the huddle with 15 seconds to go, and then have to essentially scramble to get to the line to get the snap off in time before you get a delay of game or having Kalani Sitake be forced to call a timeout. I'd like to see them maybe from time to time speed it up. This is something that's not atypical of Aaron Roderick offenses of yesteryear. He has routinely mixed up the pace of his offenses. Look back at the Zach Wilson, in particular, more of the Jaron Hall era of BYU offenses. And you saw them at times, they'd huddle up and slow things down. But then as soon as they hit a big play, they're right back on the ball, snapping the ball, trying to take advantage of the defense that's got its head spinning a little bit. I want to see more of that. I think that would actually benefit BYU because, as we have all seen, Jake Retzlaff is very good in 2-minute scenarios, albeit pretty horrendous at throwing a fade route apparently in the end zone. But that's beside the point. He's good at moving the team up and down the field in those sped up situations. So why not speed it up just a little bit? I'm not saying, like I said, play at that breakneck speed of a 2-minute offense, but let's find a happy medium between the plodding, methodical style that BYU's deployed most of this year, and let's try and speed it up just a little bit. Number 2, when BYU gets in the red zone, particularly inside the 10-yard line, stop it with the east-west motion. Going left to right, as I like to say, you guys know what I'm talking about. Going sideline to sideline ain't it. You have to attack these defenses head on. You got to tell your offensive line, and Connor Pay will be the first to take it on his shoulders and say, let us do the job. I want to see some QB power. I want to see just power run in general. Go north-south. Watch back. If you watch the 2 touchdown runs that Kansas had in that game against BYU, and like I said, there's not a lot of scoring plays to watch in that. But if you look at the 2 scoring runs, Devin Neal scoring on both of them, they were some zone concepts, but it was a power run style. It was north-south. It says, get your shoulders square and drive forward. And they were the beneficiaries of that. I felt like too often against Kansas, BYU in those scoring zone areas, I call the scoring zone 30 yards and in. I'm not the only one who calls it that, but the red zone is traditionally the 20-yard and in. I want to see, especially when you get inside like the 15, 10-yard line and it's goal to go situations, you go north-south. Stop it with the east-west motion. And rewatching that game tape, I talked about it a little bit yesterday that Jake killed that 3rd and 6 call that went with the option to the boundary. Aaron Roderick said that he actually would have preferred Jake still audible that call, but run the option to the field side. There's probably a numbers advantage that they saw in film in retrospect that Jake maybe didn't see in the moment. but I want to see more of an attack mindset. Go north-south versus east-west. I think that would absolutely help BYU be better in those situations because it's compressed quarters. The defense knows there's only so much yardage or field that the offense can use. So you know what? You tell them, yeah, we're going to be a sledgehammer here. You're going to be the nail, and we're going to punch this in for a touchdown. That's got to be the mindset for this BYU offense, I think. I think they've got a little bit away from that. I think they've gotten a little too cute at times with the play calling and the overall execution of said plays in the red zone. I'd like to see him back to being, like I said, the hammer versus the nail and prove that you guys are the tough guys you aspire to be. Now, the third thing I'd like to see for BYU's offense that I think can fix some of the woes, and it's like I said, none of these are going to be a perfect fix for what BYU is trying to do. But the third thing I want to see is I want to see a team that's playing with more of its playmakers in crunch time situations. Few of you have also mentioned this to me. Why does it feel like BYU rotates so heavily? Well, I can tell you that BYU is rotating heavily, I think, to combat, and I don't have this on good authority. So this is coming from my vantage point. As I said, I'm a second guesser here. I am an armchair analyst, for lack of a better term. But I am thinking that BYU is trying to stave off as much loss as they can via the transfer portal by playing as many guys as is possible. Does that make sense? Does that square up with what I'm trying to explain here? I'd like to see in critical situations, it doesn't matter what the rotation says, who should be in at that juncture. Darius Lassiter, Chase Roberts, LJ Martin, the big guns need to be on the field in those crunch time situations. Let them be the guys that get you across the finish line. I love the fact that BYU is trying to rotate guys. I sincerely appreciate the fact that they're trying to do that. And they're also doing this on defense as well under Jay Hill's direction on defense. They're trying to mix in young guys and get them game experience. And I think there's a added side benefit of making sure, hey, see, we're playing you. We believe in you. We want you to stay here. Don't consider the transfer portal. But I want to see in critical downs and distances, you reinsert your guys. And also, once again, I've talked about it, I think it was last week. When you go to 2 minute, there's no more rotations. You have your 3 or maybe 4 wide receivers out there. You have your tight end, you have your running back and your quarterback. And you tell them, guys, this is the unit that's going to go up and down the field. If there's a timeout, we may switch out a couple of guys. If there's an injury, we may also consider that. But until such time, you guys are it. There's no tapping the helmet, asking for out. There's no running out the field, trying to get somebody back in. None of that. You got to go with your top dogs in crunch time situations and hope it'll pay off. So there's 3 suggestions as to what I would like to see from BYU to fix this offense. Are they going to absolutely come through and Aaron Roderick and the rest of the BYU staff's going to see this podcast and say, wow, Jake Hatch knows what he's talking about? No, they're not going to do that because trust me, that's why they make the big bucks and I'm doing a podcast. These are sincerely my observations as to what I would like to see for BYU's offense to improve the product on the field, especially when it comes to scoring. You make 5 trips inside the scoring zone and you come out with 13 points of a possible 35. That is frankly abysmal, and you've got to improve it. And I think BYU is fully aware of it. Talking with people around the program yesterday, they have got a renewed focus this week on getting it right. And that's the term I was given, is getting it right. What does that mean? TBD. But they got to get it right if they want to keep their Big 12 championships hopes alive. And they got to do it this Saturday against Arizona State. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to talk a little BYU basketball. I follow a number of NBA draft analysts and out there, and a lot of them are talking very highly about Egor Demin. What are the chances we're watching a guy who could be top 5, a top 3 NBA draft pick next year? Well, according to some of them, that's a very high likelihood, and we'll talk more about that coming up next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Roy. Now, what does Roy stand for? It doesn't stand for Roy High School, and I've talked about this. It's not the Roy Burger Bar or your family or uncle who's named Roy. The thing about Roy is it stands for Return on You, and it's helping you give back to the players and keep them at the school you look for. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money that you want to put up. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. There's no risk, my friends. It's helping keep our team intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. And the best part is I'm able to nominate a player each week and hook them up with some money. This week, I am giving it to a guy who made a career mark in that loss to Kansas. That's LJ Martin. He went over 1,000 career rushing yards. He's one of just 3 running backs, Jamal Willis and then Jamal Williams, are the only other two running backs in their first 2 years in a BYU uniform to have 1,000 career rushing yards. So LJ Martin, he is our Roy Player of the Week here on Locked On Cougars, depositing some money into his account to give him some appreciation for that accomplishment. To do just that, you also can download the Roy app. You can see what the logo looks like when you're watching on YouTube, or go to joinroy.com today to take advantage and give that money over to LJ Martin. Once again, download the Roy app today or go to joinroy.com. Use the promo code Locked On to take advantage of the offers available to you now from our friends at Roy. Every athlete from every team is there, and there's no purchase necessary. And of course, it's void where prohibited. So go to joinroy.com for full terms. And of course, it's all courtesy of friends over at Roy. Support the players and change the game. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is here for you guys to get you out to the events, if not sporting events, you're interested in going to. The best part is they have a brand new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes all the tickets to your favorite teams and other events simple as possible. They filter out all the fluff, so you give you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the right option for you. They do it for you. It's as simple as that. The best part is they have curated deals, making it easy to find the best price on great seats, and they also have all of the best coverage in the entire ticketing atmosphere. They have a lowest price ticket guarantee. They'll credit you 110% of the difference if they have not the lowest prices out there. They also have a panoramic view of seat views for every venue you happen to be going out to. So right now, take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with our friends over at Game Time Picks. All you got to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. All right, BYU basketball has got a lot of eyeballs on it, and it's for good reason. Kevin Young came in and was just an absolute revelation on the recruiting trail and re-energizing a basketball community that didn't really need a ton of re-energizing, but kind of felt down on itself when Mark Pope left for the Kentucky job. Well, Kevin Young has come in, and I think it's been just absolutely incredible to watch the transformation that he's had with the BYU basketball program to this point. Well, one kid who I think is absolutely going to raise the profile of BYU as the season progresses is Egor Demin. And that's very, very easy to say. That's low-hanging fruit. But the bigger question is, and I'm going to get to a Locked On Cougars insider group mailbag here in just a moment, but there was a question that came in on it, and I can't apologize. I'm trying to find it on the fly here. Oh, there it goes. Jared Christensen. What do you think about Egor Demin's rapid rise on draft boards? Well, my honest answer is it's awesome. Now, I know that you as a fan, having the thought of having a one-and-done guy come to BYU and then 6, 7, 8 months later, all of a sudden, he is out the door and on his way to the NBA draft. Yeah, that can sting a little bit. But watch what Egor Demin is doing. He just won his second straight Newcomer of the Week award in the Big 12 Conference for his performances against Queens and also Idaho last week. And he wasn't even the star in that Idaho game. That was Fousseyni Traore and Richie Saunders. But his numbers, speaking of Egor Demin, absolutely incredible. Now, there are a lot of analysts out there who are breaking down the NBA draft 24/7. One of my favorite is NBA Big Board. Now, some of you know Chad Ford, former ESPN NBA analyst. He started his own publication called NBA Big Board, and then a couple of years ago, if I recall correctly on the timeline, he handed it over to a guy named Rafael Barlow, who has just picked up the baton and absolutely been carrying it forward. And he wrote a piece just yesterday about guys who are hot and guys who are not in the NBA draft circles right now. One of the guys on his hot list was Jagger Demin. He had this to say about Jagger Demin. He says, Jagger Demin has become the talk of college basketball circles with his incredible start to the season. And the big question is, how high can he go in the 2025 NBA draft? Some scouts believe the 6'9" BYU forward, I'd say he's more of a guard, could land in the top 5, while others think his unique blend of positional size, playmaking, and skill could push him into the top 3. Remember, Cooper Flagg is far and away considered to be the top prospect in this draft. A lot of people tell you that Ace Bailey is right there with Cooper Flagg. Is Jagger Demin the third guy in a top 3 that could be, as some consider them, generational type prospects? Are we watching a guy who's going to take the NBA by storm for years to come right before our very eyes as Cougar fans here in Provo at the Marriott Center? Sure seems that way. Now, as this continues, also mentioned that through 4 games, Demin showcases all-around talent, averaging 17 points, 7.5 assists, and 3.5 rebounds per game, while shooting an astounding 63% of the floor from the floor and 55% from 3. They do point out that his free throw shooting is just 5 of 10, so 50%. That's got to improve. And they also acknowledge the fact that BYU's beaten 4 dogs. And it's no offense to the Central Arkansas, to Queens, UC Riverside, or Idaho. But BYU, as Raphael says here, the first test is going to come next week when they take on Ole Miss, who's a top 25 team. They says that this NBA scouts will have that circled on their calendars. Before then, Demin has one more tune-up game against a struggling Mississippi Valley State team. But he says that Jaeger's early season performances have been eye-opening, though several scouts are reserving judgment until he faces tougher opponents. The upcoming Ole Miss game on Thanksgiving will give a better gauge of where he stands truly as a prospect, unquote. Hey, I'll take any and all chatter about Egor Demin right now. This is a young man who I think has the capability of really kind of transforming the perception of BYU basketball in this day and age. Kevin Young's doing that himself. He has made it very clear that he intends to make BYU an NBA factory. If guys want to go and play in the league, he's going to leverage his experience in the NBA and say, hey, I've coached some of the best players in that league. Let me help you at this level, get you to that level, and set you up for success when you reach said level. If Egor Demin can go out there and become the type of guy that, as Raphael Barlow notes, could be a top 3 NBA draft pick in next year's NBA draft, that is going to shine a very, very bright light and a positive light on BYU, A, as a basketball program, and B, as a preparation area for NBA draft hopefuls. There's a lot of chatter about AJ Dybantsa coming to BYU, and the chatter only gets louder and louder by the day. I think Dybantsa would do well to pay attention to the rise of Egor Demin and look at it and say, okay, I'm considered to be more of the Cooper Flagg type of a pick in the 2026 draft because he's a year away. But if a guy like Egor Demin can go and be a top 5, if not a top 3 pick, AJ Dybantsa is going to be thinking, all right, BYU is backing up what they have been selling me, telling me that they can get me to where I want to go. And Dybantsa was at the game against Idaho on Saturday, watching Egor Demin, watching Richie Saunders, Fousseyni Traore, and the rest of the crew do their thing against the Idaho Vandals. The nice part is, yeah, there's going to be a test against Ole Miss coming up. And there's also, I'm trying to remember who the other teams they could play down there in San Diego. And then you also have to travel across the country to Rhode Island to take on Providence that following week. There's a 3-game kind of series here in the non-conference slate that is going to be very, very interesting to watch how Egor Demin and the rest of the BYU basketball responds. If he flies high and absolutely shows that he's capable of doing that against so-called better opposition, guess what? I'm fully expecting guys like Raphael Barlow, Jonathan Givony, insert anybody out there, Mike Babcock, all of these different guys who break down the draft to write even more and more positive and praiseworthy articles about what Egor Demin could do. And that only helps BYU's status as a flourishing place for college basketball and NBA draft-like talent to come and play. I'm looking forward to this. It's been a really fun basketball season already. I know that a lot of you are locked down on football. I get all that. But basketball, it's only going to get better from here because the eyeballs only are going to get larger. We've already seen multiple NBA scouts come through. I think they said a couple of games ago, more than 70 NBA scouts have already visited BYU throughout the offseason and the early goings of this season to check out Egor Demin. And I think also by extension, Cannon Catchings, as well as Mihailo Bošković and anybody else they may have their eye on from this BYU roster. And the nice part is if you may be a fringe guy who has hopes of playing professional basketball, let's say a Fousseyni Traore, who's a senior this year, or a Richie Saunders, well, guess what? When those scouts show up and maybe you go off in a practice, they're going to write your name in that little book of theirs and say, file that away for future reference. And they'll watch the game, see if it compares with what they saw in practice. And that could open some doors for you professionally. All of this with what Egor Demin is bringing, the attention he is drawing to Brigham Young University and the Marriott Center, that only helps the entirety of the program. And by extension, hopefully helps BYU go out and land what could be the best prospect. It's not, it could be. It will be the best prospect in NBA history in AJ Dybantsa. But good things are afoot for BYU basketball, and it sure feels like things are on an up and up trajectory for Kevin Young, Jagger Demin, and the rest of the BYU Hoops program. So really cool to see that, and hopefully that answers your question, Jared. It's fun to see it. I hope it continues. I hope that Jaeger flies up those draft charts and shows what he's capable of, because I'm telling you, what I've seen with my own eyes, and I don't aspire to say that I'm any type of expert, I am watching what I feel like is a guy who could dominate in the NBA for the next 10 years minimum. He just looks the part of the modern swing / off-ball guard who can still handle the ball and just play make all over the court. That's what it feels like Egor Demin is, and BYU is going to be the beneficiary of that for at least this season. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we'll get to the rest of the questions I solicited from our Locked On Cougars Insider group. We'll see how many we can fit in the time remaining as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by a new friend of ours over on the Locked On Podcast Network. That is Mint Mobile. The best part about Mint Mobile, all of us want a good deal, but we're not going to walk across a hotbed of coals simply just to get save a few bucks and get that deal. That has to be easy. We all know that. No hoops, no BS. So Mint Mobile is here to cut through all the crap and give you the best option for you guys. And the best part is the longest part of the process is spent on hold, waiting to break up with your old provider, if that's what you're looking forward to doing. So get started. Go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. We'll see that right now, all 3-month plans start at just $15 a month. You're right. $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You also can use your current phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with you without losing all of your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month right now. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. And of course, it's $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only, and speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Tuesday, or whenever you're listening to this. Doesn't matter what day it is. I know a number of you may be catching up from whatever you got going on, but nonetheless, hope you guys are having a great day whenever you hear and or watch this, and hopefully you guys are joining the Locked On Cougars Insider group as well. Join us, get the inside scoop on all things BYU, all the stuff I can glean on BYU hoops and basketball when it comes to BYU football. I'm passing it all along on our Locked On Cougars Insider group. Join us today. Click the link in the show notes below. Get a 14-day free trial before you're charged anything with the Locked On Cougars Insider group. All right. Questions coming in here from our Locked On Cougars Insider group. First one from Jeff. What's the word on Micah Harper? Seems like he has tumbled down the depth charts returning from last year's injury. I think you nailed it right on the head right there, Jeff. Simply put, there's safeties that are in front of him that aren't really acquiescing to his hopes of getting on the field. Maybe he's been slowed up by some nagging injury concerns. I don't know that part of it. But the bigger thing is, I just think there's other guys, Tanner Wall, Crew Wakely, when he's healthy. He according to Kalani Sitake, the hope is that he can get back to practice so we can play as soon as they take on Arizona State. But that's TBD. But you also look at Tommy Prassis, Falatau Satuala, Ethan Slade. Like, there's a number of guys who have been very, very good. Raider Demouni was a breakout star this past game. It's tough to get on the field when other guys are taking a lot of the reps away from you, but maybe Micah Harper at some point has got a little bit of a swan song in him. We'll see. Other question here, and this came in like 3 or 4 people. He says, speaking of injury, is there any chance that Jake is injured? It seemed like he was favoring his left shoulder towards the end of the first half, and then it looked sharp from then on. I got a question, like I think 3 or 4 other people from the Insider group asked a similar type question. He was favoring that shoulder, and you could see the white hat. The official was asking him, hey, are you good? Are you good? Are you good? He said he was all right. And I know that's his non-throwing shoulder, so there's less concern there, but still, you don't want to have guys struggling and potentially that may be affecting their play on the field. So I'm assuming that Jake's going to be good to go. He shrugged it off, and I think there were moments in that second half that it looked like he maybe hurt a little bit, but at the same time, absolute moments of brilliance as well after he injured that shoulder. So I'm going to err on the side that he's okay, Jeff, but we'll see. Let's see. Other questions here. Our good friend Ed Norton checking in. Ed, it's been good to hear from you. He says that why is there trouble on substitutions in the last 2 games on penalties and timeouts? Seems like they are unorganized in those situations. Well, that's the thing about it is I don't think BYU is as organized as we hope they would be. There was one thing, and I'll give this credit to Ed Lamb when he was the associate head coach, I think, for BYU, is that he was very good about game ops and keeping things moving smoothly on the sideline. Since he left, it's been a little bit of a crap show. So, yeah, they need to find a way to make that better. Like, if you're going to send guys in and out of the game, kind of talked about earlier where I want to see less rotation at times, well, you may want to just have a guy who's dedicated to that on the sidelines. Now, I know that sounds like it should already be in place, but you'd be surprised how much stuff can slip through the cracks just with how many moving parts there are out there in college football. Other questions here. Let's see. Tanner, do you think Kalani will run a quicker offense against ASU to help Retzlaff find his rhythm? I think I answered that question a little bit earlier, Tanner. I do think they should run a faster tempo. There's absolutely zero doubt about that. Jimmy here. Great question. BYU may have a more of a firm foundation than they've had in 20 plus years. No matter how the rest of the season goes, the future is wildly bright for the Cougars of BYU. It's more of a statement than a question. I would agree with you, Jimmy. They've got a good platform to build from here. Now, there's an interesting dynamic out there, and I'm going to have to talk about this at some point on the podcast. Kyle Whittingham, I know that's a buzzword on this show to talk about our rival's head coach, but he lifted the lid on a lot of what's going to happen this offseason. Remember, there's supposed to be a limitation of the scholarships to 85 with a 105-man roster down from 123. How are you going to manage losing potentially upwards of 20 guys in terms of walk-ons and the like on your roster? That's a question to be answered. There's also revenue sharing coming into college football. These football programs, and Kyle already alluded to it, I'm sure BYU's at the same thing. They've already kind of laid out where they're going to allocate money for what positions. He said a quarterback's worth about $1 million in this day and age. I can tell you $1 million to $2 million is the going rate for a top shelf quarterback in most people's eyes on the transfer portal market. What is an offensive tackle worth? What's a star running back? What is a defensive end? All of that has to be allocated, and you have to essentially now, it sounds really funny to say, but you're going to have players at the end of the season in exit meetings. They're probably going to have a sheet of paper slid across the table from their position coach saying, all right, here's what we want you to work on. And also that dollar figure right at the bottom there, that is your NIL or not your NIL, your revenue valuation. This is how much we're offering you. It's a contract. We've gone professional sports, folks. We have no collective bargaining, but we are going to have legitimate contracts in college football, and it's going to be a crazy time. And I am interested to see how BYU navigates all of that because the platform and the foundation is there, Jimmy. I agree with you. You don't want to see that platform essentially torn up because guys decide to jump ship and leave. All right. Let's see other questions here. Looking at the CFP setup, this comes from Austin. Do you feel like BYU would benefit more from a first-round bye or getting to host a first-round playoff game / playing in a first-round game at all? For reference, between the Big 12 championship and the first round, there's roughly a 2-week break. Having a first-round bye will be no game for 3 weeks. There's arguments for rest versus rust, Austin, but I think in this circumstance, if you're BYU, you want to be a top 4 seed if at all possible. And I know that loses out on having a home game potentially, but you want to have a few games in front of you of winning a championship. If you have to play in that first round, you've got to win 4 games. First round, quarterfinal, semifinal, CFP championship to win a national championship. That's 4 games over about a month span. It's a lot of wear and tear on already tired bodies. So I think fewer games is the more prudent way to go about it if BYU has that opportunity. That's the other thing. They've got to go out and win it Saturday to keep that dream alive. Let's see. These are some great questions here. This is awesome. Nick Chadwick. Seems like Jay Hill truly enjoys being at BYU. What are the chances he leaves after this year? And if he does, heaven help us he doesn't, do they stay in-house to replace him? Let's answer the first part first. There is a chance Jay Hill does leave because this is a guy who's been an ultra successful head coach at the FCS level. He came to BYU seeking an opportunity to go out and run his own power level program. He never got that opportunity, and he would have taken a G5 job jumping from Weber State. And I can tell you, based on what I've talked to people about, Jay Hill applied for essentially any open position in the Mountain West Conference and was spurned on all of them. Think what some of these programs in the Mountain West would have done with a guy like Jay Hill at the helm of their program. Stupid at best for them not to consider him more heavily, but BYU is the beneficiary of that. Now, how does his health situation with that heart attack play into this? That's also got to be answered. I know that Jay would aspire to be a power level head coach at some point in the relatively near future, but I don't think that he's going to be looking to jump right away from BYU. He's got a good thing in Provo. He's making good money. He's coaching with a lot of guys he's very, very happy to be around. But if one of those offers, one of the so-called you can't refuse it type offer comes, guess what? He will be leaving. And I think that BYU would be wise to look in-house. You could look at Kelly Papinga. You could look at Justin Enna to elevate them to defensive coordinator, maybe co-coordinators to run things for BYU. But Kalani's got a very, very extensive relationship with a lot of coaches, a big network out there. So he would be unafraid to look outside the bubble if he needed to, but I think in-house, he's got a few options that are already there as well. So I do think there's some interesting parts on that. Bryce Prince, is there any word on Ryder Lyons' impression of BYU this past weekend? I don't have any firsthand knowledge of the reaction, Bryce, but I will be doing some research and see what I can find out for him. Maybe I'll reach out to him directly and see if I can get a comment on that. Let's see. Final question here. We're running out of time here. Okay, we actually got two of them real quick. Brady, a new member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group as of like literally yesterday. So Brady, thanks for joining up. I actually had a few different questions here, but I'm going to get to just one of these. It says the odds on an end zone fade are so low, I rarely see it succeed even with high-end talent in the NFL. Didn't like that. Speaking of Greg Wrubell, they said they needed, I think he's talking about Aaron Roderick, that they needed to adjust much just to practice better. Okay. The thing about it is the fade route. Yes, it is one of those plays that its success rate is really, really low. I am a person who is a longtime advocate of ban the goal line fade, but if they go with it, you got to make a better throw than Jake Retzlaff made in that situation. Yes, you can practice it as much as you want, but in practice and in real game scenarios, I'll quibble with it a little bit because I just don't think it's a ultra successful play. It's not one of those plays you're like, all right, this has got to 60% of the time it works all of the time. It's the Anchorman quote. No, it's even less than that. I think Travis, our good friend on the podcast, he's pointed out, I think it was like 15%. We were going back and forth on that in game actually on Saturday night. And then the final note on this from Kent, this is more of an observation from Kent. It says, the media does not seem to give us, speaking of BYU, a break on anything. I mean, we lose one game and we get destroyed. I think BYU State gets more representation than we do. Yes, they did win, but barely to very inferior teams. That's why this loss was so frustrating because I knew, speaking of BYU, would get hammered. I hope the team uses this as chip on the shoulder material and destroys Arizona State. I've already bought my Big 12 championship tickets and my flight and my place to stay. I really want to go and watch BYU play. Well, Kent, I don't think you're alone in saying that. Yes, the media does hammer BYU because I don't know if bias against them, whatever it is. And I do think that there are times out there that it's unabashed in terms of some of that bias out there. I've tried on this podcast to be an advocate for BYU, but I'm also biased on the opposite side of things. I want to see BYU in Arlington. I will be on a cruise ship coming home off of a cruise when that game takes place. But I would love nothing more than to see BYU there in Arlington. And I would do my absolute darndest if I can get off that ship early enough, maybe to catch a flight from Fort Lauderdale to Dallas. Pray for me that there's some flights available. But we'll dig into that when that bridge comes. Point number one, go out and destroy Arizona State. Make a statement this week and show that, that was a blip. Kansas was a blip. Because if you do lose the Arizona State, guess what the refrain is going to be? See, we told you BYU was a fraud. See, we told you they were scraping by with numbers that weren't going to hold up in the long term. All that is going to be out there. So BYU, the best thing they can do, go out there and win the dang football game and shut everybody up once again. That's the long and short of it. All right. I have a few more questions here. I'll probably work them in the rest of the week, but thank you to all of you who weighed in with your thoughts as always. And always feel free to reach out anytime. Even if you're not a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, even though I'd like you guys to be, reach out via social media. Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can hit me up on Blue Sky if you're on that new network, at Jake Hatch or Jacob C. Hatch on X/Twitter if you want to reach out to me there. Or as always, you can email us, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. So once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Please subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. It's the holiday season. Nothing goes better with a gift than saying, hey, check out this cool BYU podcast, and make everybody else that you know and every day are with you right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.